Hey guys, it's Jeff with Speed Industry. Today we're going to talk about fuel, and specifically we're going to be putting on this EOS port injection system. So why do we need a port injection system on a Supra? Well, let's talk about the three basic components of the Supra fuel system. The first component is obviously the in-tank pump. The in-tank pump supplies pressure up to the high pressure pump. So on the car itself, this line right here is your low pressure feed. That low pressure feed comes into your high pressure pump, which is right here. This high pressure pump also has a motor, so it actually varies the pressure on your fuel rail, which is right here. That fuel rail feeds what we call DI injectors. DI stands for direct injection. It means that they inject directly into the chamber. Part of the downfall of direct injection, there are many ups, but one of the downfalls is the fact that your window to put fuel into the cylinder is small, because obviously you don't want to put it in on anything but basically the intake / maybe slightly into the compression stroke. So that lowers your window. So what happens on these cars, the high pressure pump runs out of fuel first at low speed, because it's a mechanical pump that basically produces fuel flow volume based on engine speed. So that's your first limitation. So everybody kind of hears about that. That's why people use meth or detune the torque to make that still work and kind of balance with the system. The second limitation comes in the form of that injector window at the higher RPM range. So what we're going to talk about today, like we mentioned, is adding a port system. So a port system is basically a injection system like earlier cars had before DI. So this port system literally injects fuel into the port instead of into the chamber. So this piece right here is going to sandwich between our cylinder head and our intake manifold and give us 6 more injectors that can be controlled to add fuel. This is similar to meth injection, but it's much more reliable in terms of the controllers are more reliable, the injectors are much more precise. You have electronic control to basically ramp things in and actually shape the fuel curve a little bit. And also it gives us better distribution. When you look at the stock manifold and you're putting meth into your throttle body right about here, it's coming in and it has to distribute itself across all 6 cylinders. Depending on the airflow and what direction it goes, it will distribute unevenly, which could cause you cylinder issues down the road. The other problem that we have is you're putting volume before the intercooler, which is, if you don't know, sandwiched in here. So you're limiting something by putting fuel volume to replace air volume. So that causes more restrictions. So that's a horsepower loss too. So to start, I'm going to walk you through the electrical, which I already did on this car because it's a little tedious and I didn't want to have to do it here at the shop here at Edge. But I already have the harness laid. One thing nice about the EOS kit is it comes with a harness that's made for the car and actually lays pretty nice. So if we start over here, our harness is here. It's going to go under the manifold, connect one connector to each injector. We tap into this T-map sensor, which you can see right here. That will give us a voltage for the map sensor, which will read what our manifold pressure is so that we can adjust the pulse width and the fuel based on manifold pressure. As you come around, what I did, the harness runs along here. I still have to neaten this up a little bit, but comes around, and what I did is I mounted the box in here. So you can see, and I made one connector here that goes inside the car. This is our line from the map sensor, and it goes into the ECU. Our ground wire is going to go to one of the grounds over here. And then, like I said, this goes in. One is switch power, which you can get from the fuse box that's underneath passenger footwell area, which is very easy to get at, and you can just use an add a fuse, makes it really clean. There's an RPM signal you need to pick up. You can pick it up outside the engine bay, but due to heat, vibration, all that stuff, I kind of like to go in the car. So what we recommend is running a line across the car over to the OBD2 port. And that port actually has on pin 9 a tax signal. Not all cars have that, but it's kind of nice that BMW did that for us, so that will give us an RPM. So the box then gives us RPM, or has an RPM input and a map input. So between that, we get a 3D table that we can tune pulse width for the injectors to add that extra fuel. So we're gonna get working on getting things switched over, and we'll do a couple shots like throughout the install, and then I'll talk to you at the end. Hey guys, working on the mechanical side of this install. I want to stop and talk about a couple of the little nuances of pulling this out. One thing we learned is pulling the throttle body off helps because it hits the AC line right here. Also, you need to make sure, I wasn't going to disconnect the battery because we weren't really doing a lot of electrical, but you got to unhook a bunch of the ECU connectors to actually get this harness out of the way to actually get the manifold up. One thing nice about this manifold is the bolts are actually molded in, so the bolts that can't come out. And those are going to be the same bolts that you're going to bolt it down with. So when you loosen those up, there's two other bolts over here. You basically disconnect some of these lines and get those out of the way. And it takes a little bit of work to kind of get it. We kind of found you had to move it back and up to get it around these two brackets. There's two coolant lines that basically run the coolant for the intercooler system that are underneath the manifold. And those are a little tricky to get out of the way. So once we kind of got that maneuvered and figured out, the manifold kind of came up and forward, and it should give us plenty of room to actually put the plate in and get it hooked up. These are the parts we're going to put on. One thing I want to note is this plate's pretty thick, right? So what it's going to do, it's going to space the manifold up and out a little bit. So I'm kind of a fan of the stock charge pipes. I mean, I know a lot of people like these for having nitrous bungs or meth bungs, but I will have to put this on my car because I need some adjustment. The stock pipe has very little leeway, so when you put this spacer on and it moves the manifold up, you're not going to be able to run that stock charge pipe anymore. I know most of you guys, once you get this point, you don't have it on anyway, but I wanted to bring that up to make sure that you know that you're going to have that adjustment. Okay guys, so we got our EOS plate in place. Only word of advice is basically make sure that when you get it in and lined up, we use Loctites on the bolt too, so because I don't want to have to get in there if the bolt loosens up. But take your time lining up the injector connectors and make sure they're not hitting anything. Make sure once you bolt it down, make sure the injectors rotate and there's nothing binding. Get the fuel rail kind of routed out around. There's also those spacers that go on the bracket that support the back of the manifold. I put the back one on when the manifold was kind of up and we were putting the plate on. That made it a lot easier. The front one is it's a little trickier. You probably need two guys, one guy to kind of hold the manifold, one to pull the bracket back so that you can get in there and tighten it down. But now everything's pretty much back in place, and it's just a matter of doing the reverse order in terms of getting all our ECU connectors reconnected, get all our vacuum lines connected, and torque everything down. And we'll be back with you as soon as we get everything back buttoned up. Okay guys, I wanted to stop and show you something that we ran into, something that I haven't heard anybody talk about, but I know can be an issue. So just like the charge pipe, and we had to put spacers in here because the manifold moves up and over, we ran into an issue to where we couldn't put this bracket back in the clips. So we had to cut the zip ties, and obviously we've re-zip tied them, so that we can readjust this harness. Now, one thing is these things kind of will move around, so you could pull it, like this one's not in there. You can basically pull this ahead and clip it in, and then when we put the cover back on, it'll hold that in place. Another hose too, or another harness, which goes to your DI injectors, this was also tight. So what we had to do is unclip this, and then we can clip these back in Make sure that we've got, ample, relief, and then clip that back in, and now we're good to go on that. Okay guys, that wraps it up. We're gonna connect the battery, check for leaks. Make sure you check really well down underneath. Make sure you don't have any fuel leaks. We definitely don't want any thermal events from anything on any of these cars. I do want to comment too that these boxes that control these port systems do not come with the calibration. So you need to contact Speed Industry and make sure that you get a proper calibration for these boxes so that you have proper control of the engine. But if you're looking to make power, this will give you the fuel to make that power with proper other components. So if you need more information, make sure to click the link up top. Subscribe and ring the bell if you like what we're seeing. Make a comment in the comments section. We will be working with the system and doing some dyno work with it and reporting out some quarter mile and horsepower numbers with our Pure 800 that's already on the car, and also switching to the Pure 700, so stay tuned.